3 agreements stand between you and the prosperity God already promised you. Not 3 mistakes, not 3 sins, 3 agreements. Agreements you made quietly, maybe during a hard season, maybe watching your parents struggle, maybe the day someone told you that people like you don't end up wealthy. You didn't sign a paper, you didn't say it out loud, but you agreed, and that agreement became law in your life. Here is what frightens me. I have spoken with hundreds of men and women who pray every single day, who give, who work hard, who seek God sincerely, and whose finances haven't moved in years, decades. And the reason is not that God abandoned them. The reason is that before every prayer, they return home to those 3 silent agreements. They pray forward, and then they walk back. Today I am going to name all 3, and I am going to tell you exactly how to break every one of them. But stay with me, because the first agreement is probably the one you think is protecting you. When you hear it, you may not believe it is an agreement at all. You may believe it is wisdom. You may believe it is caution. You may believe it is the responsible version of faith. That is exactly why it is the most dangerous of the 3. And before I reveal the second agreement, I need to warn you now, it is the one that religious people make most often. It hides inside worship. It looks like surrender to God, and it has quietly destroyed the finances of some of the most sincere, devoted people I have ever known. I will show you everything. Do not leave. Before I go further, if this kind of teaching speaks to your spirit, subscribe to this channel right now. Every week I bring a word here that the world will not give you. This is not motivation. This is not self-help. This is Torah applied to your real life, your real finances, your real situation. Hit that subscribe button. It costs you nothing. And it may cost you everything if you miss what's coming next. Now, let us begin. In the book of Numbers, and chapter 13, Moses sends 12 men to examine the promised land. They walk the same ground. They see the same fruit. They breathe the same air. They serve the same God. 10 come back and say, "We cannot take it. We are like grasshoppers in our own eyes." 2 come back and say, "We are well able." Same land, same God, same promise, same mission, different agreement. The 10 did not lie about what they saw. The giants were real. The walls were real. The obstacles were documented and accurate. But before they ever opened their mouths, they had already made an agreement, internally, silently, that said, "This is beyond us." And that internal agreement became the instruction to everything that followed. Not one of those 10 ever entered the land. Not because God withdrew the promise, because the agreement overrode the promise. This is not metaphor. This is not sermon illustration. This is law. The Talmud teaches that a man's heart precedes his hand. What you agree to internally, before you speak, before you act, before you pray, that is already the direction you have given your life. The hand only follows where the heart has already arrived. Now, let's name the first agreement. The first agreement, the agreement of the ceiling. There is a financial ceiling in your life, and you did not simply hit it. You built it. I want you to think about a number, the number that in your mind represents enough, not wealthy, not abundant, just enough comfortable. Maybe it is a certain monthly income. Maybe it is simply paying your bills without fear. Maybe it is a version of stability that your family never had. Hold that number in your mind. Now ask yourself this honestly. Where did that number come from? For most people, and I mean most, not some, that number did not come from revelation. It did not come from prayer. It came from the highest point the people around them ever reached. It came from the kitchen table where money was. Described as something scarce, something other families had, something that required luck or connections that your people never possessed. And at some point, you agreed. You did not say aloud, "I agree that I will never exceed what my parents had." But you organized your entire life around that ceiling. Your risks, your ambitions, your prayers, even your prayers carry the ceiling, because you pray for enough, not for abundance, because abundance feels arrogant, and arrogant feels dangerous, and dangerous feels like someone other than you. This is not humility. It is not modesty. It is not godly contentment. It is prophecy, negative prophecy, self-authored prophecy spoken over your own bloodline. God told Abraham, "Look at the stars," not "Look at your resources," not "Look at your history," not "Look at what your father achieved." Look at the stars. That is the number. That is the ceiling. Or rather, that is the evidence that there is no ceiling. When you agree internally to a smaller number than what God spoke over your life, you are not being realistic. You are overriding revelation with fear. You are choosing your father's result over your father's promise. I worked for many years with a man I will call Michael. He was a contractor, skilled, reliable, loved by every client he served. For 11 years, his business grew to a specific point every year and stopped. Not because the market failed him, not because he lacked talent or character, because 11 years before, in 2004, the week his father's business collapsed, Michael had made a silent decision. I will not build higher than what I can afford to lose. That decision protected him from repeating his father's fall, but it also became the instruction embedded in every choice he made from that day forward. Every opportunity that exceeded the ceiling, he found a reason to pass, not from fear, not from laziness, from an agreement he had forgotten he made. I sat with Michael and asked him one question. When did you decide this was the maximum? He was quiet for a long time. Then he said, the week my father closed his business. The ceiling wasn't built by the market. It was built in 1 week, by one internal decision, by one agreement that was never meant to be permanent, but that he had been honoring for 11 years without knowing it. Now, before I show you the second agreement, I need to prepare you. What I'm about to describe next is harder to accept than this one, because the second agreement does not come from fear. It comes from something that looks exactly like faith. It lives inside religious language, and it is the reason devout, sincere, God-fearing people remain financially suspended for years without ever understanding why their prayers are not moving anything. Stay with me. The second agreement is not made in weakness. It is made in what feels like strength. That is why it is the most spiritually dangerous of the three. The second agreement, the agreement of the eternal. Tomorrow. There is a version of trust in God that is actually a spiritual costume for delay, and it is so convincing, so fluent in the language of faith, that the person wearing it cannot always distinguish it from genuine surrender. You know this version. It sounds like, God will provide in His time. It sounds like, I am waiting for the right season. It sounds like, when things align, when my situation changes, when I am more prepared, then I will move. This sounds like patience. It sounds like wisdom. It sounds like maturity. But here is what Torah says about tomorrow. In Exodus, when the manna falls from heaven, the instruction is specific. Gather it today, not tomorrow, not this week. Today, what is left overnight rots, not because God is testing willpower, because abundance operates in the present tense. What you do not receive today cannot be stored until you are ready. The manna does not wait for your preparation. The agreement of the eternal tomorrow says, prosperity lives in a future version of my life, a version where I am more ready, more stable, more positioned. And because prosperity lives in that future version, you never have to receive it now. You never have to act now. You never have to change now. Tomorrow becomes the permanent residence of your obedience, and you remain exactly where you are. I want to tell you about a woman I knew for many years. I will call her Clara. Clara was not in financial crisis. She was in financial suspension. She had a skill, trained in her work, respected by clients, capable of moving to the next level of her income. For 6 years, every decision required to advance was met by the same response. Soon, I am getting ready. I am almost there. She was not postponing from laziness. She was postponing from principle. She genuinely believed she was waiting on God. She spoke about it with conviction. She had scripture for it. She had peace about it. What I observed and what I told her, without gentleness, when was this? She had confused waiting with hiding. Waiting is an active posture. You wait the way a farmer waits for rain. The soil tilled, the seeds in the ground, the farmer watching the sky, everything in position. Only the provision is missing, and that belongs to God. Hiding is different. Hiding says, I have not tilled the soil because I am waiting for the rain to come first. Clara had not tilled the soil in 6 years, and every season she pointed to the sky and called it faith. When I told her this, she was angry. Then she went quiet. Then she wept because she already knew. The agreement had lived in her for years under the name of surrender, and the most painful part was not the correction. It was the recognition that she had been the one holding herself in place, while blaming the season. The Talmud records this precisely. It is not your obligation to complete the work, but neither are you free to desist from it. You are not required to finish, but you are required to begin. The agreement of the eternal tomorrow breaks the covenant because it assigns to God the responsibility for your movement, and God already completed his part. The promise was spoken. The inheritance was assigned. The instruction was given. The path was opened. The only thing that is missing, the only thing that has ever been missing, is your step. Before I name the third agreement, I want to stop here for a moment. If you are watching this and you feel the weight of what I have been describing, if you recognize one or both of these agreements in your own life, I want to pray for you personally. Leave your first name in the comments below. Just your first name. Nothing else is needed. I read these comments. I will pray specifically over every name that is left here. Your name before God is not a small thing. You are not anonymous to him. And if this channel has been speaking to your spirit, if these teachings have been giving you something real, something you are not finding anywhere else, then subscribe right now. Click that button. Join this community. There are thousands of people walking the same road you are walking. You do not have to walk it alone. Subscribe. Now, the third agreement. I want to warn you before I name it. This one will make you the most uncomfortable, because it is not the agreement of the struggling person. It is the agreement carried by people who work hard, who achieve visible things, who have real testimony, and who still never touch the full level of what was promised to them. It hides inside your history, and it uses your own pain as its evidence. The third agreement, the agreement of the exception. This is the agreement that says, the spiritual laws apply to others, but my situation is different. Different how? Different because your past is too layered. Different because what happened to your family, what was taken, what was lost, what was done, created a particular situation that the general promises of God were not fully designed to address. You don't say this out loud, you would never say this to another person, but privately, in the place where your deepest financial beliefs live, you have a clause, an asterisk, a footnote that says, except for me. This agreement does not say, I don't believe in God. It says, I believe in God, and I believe my case is the exception. And here is what that exception does. It creates a permanent escape from every principle you hear. You can receive the teaching, understand it fully, even share it with others, and then quietly exempt yourself, because your situation is specific, complicated, too real to be resolved by a law that works for ordinary cases. I want to tell you about a man I will call Elias. Elias came from a family that had experienced documented generational financial destruction, not metaphor. His grandfather had lost land. His father had been defrauded and never recovered. There was a real, traceable history of financial devastation across 3 generations. Elias worked hard, he believed. He gave generously, he had genuine faith, but he had also, in a place he never examined directly, decided that the covenant promises came with an unwritten footnote for his bloodline. God was good, but what had happened to his family was a particular kind of wound, and particular wounds required particular exceptions. So he continued giving, continued praying, continued achieving modestly, and continued living below the inheritance, not from unbelief, but from a secret doctrine he had constructed from his own history of pain. The day I sat with Elias, I asked him to read Deuteronomy 33 aloud. Then the Lord your God will restore your fortunes and have compassion on you. I asked, does that verse say, except for families with generational financial loss? He said, no. I asked, does it say, unless the damage extends across 3 generations? He said, no. I asked, then why are you living as if it does? The silence that followed was very long. Elias had built a private theology of personal exception, and that theology was more powerful than any verse he confessed publicly, because it was the last law he actually believed when no one was watching. The agreement of the exception is not unbelief. It is not even doubt in the common sense. It is a silent doctrine, one you developed from real pain, through real experience, for real protection, and it overrides the written covenant with your personal history. But covenant does not have asterisks. Covenant does not say most people except those with your particular past. Covenant speaks to the bloodline, to the inheritance, to the restoration of what was lost across every generation. The exception you wrote, however understandable, however earned, is not in the original text. Now I need you to ask yourself honestly, and do not pass this question quickly. Which of these three agreements do you carry? The ceiling, the eternal, tomorrow, the exception, because most people carry at least two, and some carry all three simultaneously without knowing it, while continuing to work, to pray, and to wonder why the promise has not arrived. If you recognized yourself in any of these, stay with me, because I am about to give you the exact protocol for breaking every agreement, not a motivational exercise, not a positive thinking strategy, a covenant reset, and it requires something real from you. Let me tell you what, breaking an agreement actually costs. It costs the comfort of an excuse. That is not a small cost. Do not minimize it. The agreement, whichever one you carry, has been serving you. It has been providing a reason why things are the way they are, a reason why the breakthrough has not come, a reason that carries you through the hardest mornings without requiring you to change anything fundamental about how you operate. When you break the agreement, you lose the reason, and you stand before your life with nothing between you and full responsibility. No ceiling to blame, no season to wait for, no exception to invoke. Just the question, what am I doing today with what God already gave me? That discomfort is not a sign that something is wrong. It is the sensation of a covenant being repaired. Here is the protocol. Step 1. Name the agreement. Not in general terms. Specifically, take a piece of paper, not a phone, not a note app, a piece of paper, and write the agreement in one sentence. One sentence specific enough to be uncomfortable. I decided I could not build higher than my father, because I watched him fail. I have been waiting to act for years, because I confused delay with obedience. I believe the promises of God carry an exception for my family because of what happened to us. Write it. The act of naming it on paper is not a psychological exercise. It is the first step of a legal declaration. You cannot renounce what you have not named. You cannot break an agreement that remains anonymous in your life. The Talmud is clear on this. Confession, vidui, must be specific, not general. A general confession resolves nothing. A specific confession names the wound and begins the healing. Name the agreement. Step 2. Identify when the agreement was sealed. There was a moment, a week, a conversation, a season of pain. Something happened, and in response to it, you made an internal decision that eventually calcified into the agreement you still carry. You do not need to relive the pain. You need to locate the source, because the agreement is not eternal. It has a beginning. It was made at a specific point in your history, and what was made at a specific point can be unmade at a specific point. Write the moment. One sentence. I made this agreement the year my business collapsed. I made this agreement listening to my mother describe poverty as our permanent condition. I made this agreement the day I decided that my grandfather's story would also be mine. Write it. The agreement loses power when it is located in time. It was not always true. It had a beginning, which means it can have an end. Step 3. Speak a counter-declaration from covenant text, not an affirmation, not a positive statement you composed yourself. A declaration rooted in covenant text, one verse from Torah, from Psalms, from Proverbs, that speaks directly against the specific agreement you wrote in step 1. One verse, chosen specifically. Read it, aloud every morning for 21 days, not as repetition therapy, not as willpower training, as a legal act. In Torah, a verbal declaration made before witnesses carries legal authority. You are making a verbal declaration before the ultimate witness. You are speaking a covenant word over the exact location of the broken agreement every morning before the day can re-establish the old instruction. 21 days is the minimum for displacement. The agreement was not built in one day. The counter-declaration does not displace it in one day, but it displaces it consistently, faithfully, every morning, out loud, the same verse, the same location, the same intention. Step 4. Take one step today that the agreement told you was not for you. Not a large step, one step. If the agreement of the ceiling said you cannot go beyond this point, take one action today that crosses it. One conversation you avoided. One opportunity you declined because it felt too large. One decision you postponed because the ceiling said it was not yours. One step. This step is not about producing a result. It is about authority. It is about who is giving instructions to your life. When the children of Israel crossed the Jordan, the priests stepped into the water, and before the water parted, not after the miracle, before it. The water did not divide, and then they stepped in. They stepped in, and then the water moved. The step comes before the opening. Your one step today is the foot in the water. Do not wait for confirmation before you move. The step is the declaration. The results follow obedience, not the other way around. They always have. They always will. Step 5. Speak the covenant over one other person. After you have named your agreement, located its origin, made your declaration, and taken your step, find one person in your life who carries a similar agreement. You already know who they are. You recognize them while watching this. You saw the agreement in them clearly, which is partly why you never saw it fully in yourself. Speak what you have learned to them, not to fix them, not to position yourself as their teacher, to seal the covenant in your own life by extending it outward. There is a principle recorded throughout Torah: what you release, you receive. When you speak life over someone else's financial identity, you are reinforcing the covenant in your own. You cannot genuinely call someone out of the agreement of the sealing while privately maintaining your own. The act of speaking breaks the agreement in both directions simultaneously. This is not strategy. It is how covenant has always worked. This is the protocol. 5 steps. It begins today. Day 1. You name the agreement and locate its origin. Days 2 through 21. You speak the counter-declaration every morning. Somewhere in that window, before day 7, you take your step, and before this week is over, you find your person and speak. No financial resource required, no course, no external permission to wait for, no more favorable season to hold out for. The only requirement is what I named at the beginning: your excuse. That is the price. And the reason that price feels high is precisely because the agreement has been serving you for so long. Let me leave you with this before we close. Every one of the 3 agreements I described today, the sealing, the eternal tomorrow, the exception, was made by a reasonable person responding to real pain. Not one of them was made from stupidity. Not one of them was made from malice. They were built as shelter, and for a time they served that function. But a shelter built for a storm that has passed becomes a cage after the storm ends. The threat that built the ceiling has already passed. The season that required the eternal tomorrow is already over. The wound that created the exception has already been addressed in the covenant, addressed before you were born, addressed at the level of bloodline, addressed with language that does not include asterisks. The agreement served its time is over, and you have, right now, today, without any additional resource, everything required to break it. Before I close, I want to pray over you. If you are carrying one of these agreements or all 3, if something shifted in you while watching this, I want to bring your name before God specifically. Leave your first name in the comments right now. Just your first name. That is all. I read every comment in this section, and I will pray over every name that is left here. Your name is not small before God. Your situation is not forgotten. He did not send you to this video by accident. And if this channel has been a place of real teaching for you, if what you receive here has been strengthening your walks, and subscribe. Click that button now. This community is built for people who are serious about their covenant, serious about their lives, and serious about not passing the agreement to the next generation. Subscribe, bring someone with you. Share this video with one person who is stuck. You already know who it is. You thought of them while watching. Send it. That act of sharing may be the step they needed someone else to take on their behalf. In the next video, I am going to show you something about prayer and provision that will challenge everything you think you know about asking God for financial breakthrough. Not prayer for money, a principle from the book of Proverbs about prayer. That becomes provision, that operates as a spiritual mechanism, not a request. If what I showed you today moved something in you, what is coming next will complete it. Subscribe so you do not miss it. Now let me pray. Lord of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, I lift to you every name written in these comments, every person who came to this video because something in their spirit was searching for truth and was sent here by your hand. I ask you to break every agreement made in fear, in pain, in survival, agreements that were necessary for a season and have now run past their time. Restore the original covenant, the one spoken before their birth, the one written over their bloodline before their history began. Let the step they take today be received as the foot of the priest at the Jordan, and let the water part. Let the sealing be removed. Let the delay end. Let the exception clause be struck from the record, not by effort, by covenant authority, and let this word not return void. Shalom, my friend, until next time.